She didn't cry, didn't argue, didn't even look confused when he said it, just lowered her eyes and clutched the small school project she'd made by hand. "Fix your face when I'm talking," that's what he told her. Not a teacher, not a tourist, the former President of the United States. Speaking to Princess Charlotte, inside Buckingham Palace. It should have ended there, but before she could answer, before staff could intervene, one guard moved, not her father, not a senior royal. Sergeant Theon Ward, who hadn't spoken during duty in 18 years, stepped forward, placed one boot between them, and didn't move. Now, before we show you the exact moment Prince William entered the hallway, and why the guard's one sentence made the entire palace go still, drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from, tap like, hit subscribe, and turn on the bell icon. Because this wasn't about politics, it was about protection. The corridor had always been one of the quiet ones, tucked behind the King's Gallery, lit by softened sconces that cast a calm glow across the limestone floors. This wasn't where tourists were led, or dignitaries received. It was a place for tutors, stewards, and the quieter fragments of royal routine, music practice, language revision, occasional project displays. Today, it was Princess Charlotte's cardboard model that stood at the end of the corridor, a modest recreation of a Victorian music chamber, complete with piano legs cut from matchsticks and a velvet red drawing room she'd painted herself. A staff member knelt beside the model, praising its detail. Charlotte nodded quietly, hands folded behind her back, her polished flats neatly aligned. She wasn't beaming, more reserved than usual, but not withdrawn, just focused. The moment was calm. Then came footsteps, heavier, looser in tempo. A voice followed, too familiar, too loud for this hall. Donald Trump had arrived 10 minutes early for his pre-filming walkthrough. The televised interview was scheduled for the Rose drawing room later that evening, but as always, he wanted a private look. His team of aides had cleared the path, and now he wandered slightly ahead of them, stopping at displays, tapping on door frames, smirking at details others ignored. He spotted Charlotte before anyone could redirect him. She stood beneath the archway, facing the wall where her project rested. A perfectly composed child, royal, yes, but clearly young. He grinned. "Hey there," Trump said, stepping forward with a chuckle. "You the artist?" Charlotte turned slowly. She said nothing, not out of rudeness, but from instinct. Her chin dipped slightly, and a flicker of something passed across her face. Not fear, not disgust, just discomfort. The kind only children show plainly before they learn how to mask it. Trump's grin faltered. He gave a soft scoff. Then, with the flat snap of two fingers, said, "Fix your face when I'm talking." The sound echoed off the corridor's stone. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp, the kind of tone that doesn't register as cruel until it lands on the wrong audience. The staffer froze, eyes widening. Charlotte blinked once. She didn't cry, didn't flinch, but her shoulders drew inward. A small physical retreat, subtle but visible to anyone who knew how to watch. And one man did. Before the air could shift again, before aides could fumble for apology or redirection, Sergeant Theon Ward moved. No hesitation, no glance, just one step forward, deliberate, grounded, his ceremonial boot striking the marble with the weight of silence weaponized. Then another step, and a third, until he stood directly between Donald Trump and the young princess. He didn't speak, didn't gesture. He simply stood, spine locked, shoulders squared, eyes level, and became a wall. The silence that followed Sergeant Theon Ward's movement wasn't empty, it was stunned. The American aides stilled mid-breath. The palace staffer instinctively stepped back, unsure whether to intervene or simply vanish. Even Charlotte, who had started to withdraw, now stood frozen behind the tall line of red and black wool before her. What had just been a minor, if tone-deaf moment, now held weight, and no one was sure what came next. But Theon knew. He had trained for 18 years, not just in ceremonial presence, but in stillness under pressure. What most visitors never saw, what even junior officers rarely understood, was that the uniform was not just fabric. It was a threshold, a living border between legacy and intrusion. And Theon Ward, he had spent his career on that line. At 46, he had long outlasted his early rotations at Wellington Barracks. His time in Afghanistan before royal service had carved discipline into his posture. But it was Buckingham Palace that had taught him how to apply it without weaponry, how to protect without speaking, how to enforce without violence. His ceremonial role was straightforward today. A rotation post, 3 hours assigned to the West Corridor during internal rehearsal and preparation hours. High-profile guests were flagged, yes, but this visit? Just a casual pre-recording scout, cleared for proximity to press wings and formal rooms only. Charlotte's presence wasn't even scheduled, which is why, when he heard the click of Trump's leather soles and saw the man round the archway alone, Theon's awareness activated long before protocol required it. Trump didn't recognize him. Of course not. No one ever did. That was the job, to blend in until it mattered. But Theon remembered him. This was not the first time he'd stood within 15 feet of the man. There had been a banquet 3 years ago, different room, same tone. That day, Trump had waved off a steward offering gloves, declaring, "You're not paid enough to tell me what's royal." Theon had catalogued the phrase but hadn't moved. Today was different, because this time it wasn't about decorum. It was about a child, and Charlotte wasn't just any child. She was the future's future, still learning, still absorbing, still vulnerable to the ways that adults shape what becomes truth. Theon hadn't hesitated because of her title. He'd moved because of the expression on her face. Discomfort, yes, but more than that, self-doubt. That terrible flash when a child wonders if they're wrong for simply feeling something. That was the danger. Not Trump's voice, not the cameras, not even the aides. It was the seed of distortion that could be planted in a young mind by a man who wouldn't remember what he said 5 minutes later. And so Theon did what only a guard of his standing could do without asking. He stepped between her and the source, not to challenge a president, but to preserve a child's sense of self before it was ever allowed to erode. Trump blinked. For a moment, it seemed he hadn't fully registered what had just happened. His weight shifted back slightly as his eyes rose along the vertical line of red wool and brass, from the black high-gloss boots to the squared shoulders, past the gleaming white cross strap, and finally up to the tall, plain, solid black ceremonial bearskin hat which brushed the archway's carved stone. He gave a small snort, somewhere between amusement and disbelief. "Is this a bit?" he asked aloud, half-turned toward his entourage. "Come on, relax, she's fine. I was just talking to her." No one responded. Behind him, one aide cleared their throat. Another tapped something on a phone that clearly had nothing to do with scheduling. The Secret Service detail, closer to the rear, exchanged quick glances, but none moved. Palace guards were not approached lightly, especially not when they were in motion. Trump gestured vaguely toward Charlotte, who now stood just behind Theon's left elbow, still silent. "You see? She's not even upset. She's just quiet, like all kids are when they're shy or whatever. You ever try to talk to your own kids? Same look." Still, nothing. A few steps behind, the palace staffer shifted her weight, lips parting, maybe to explain, maybe to intervene, but she hesitated, because it was clear now. This wasn't awkward anymore. It was institutional. Theon hadn't flinched. His eyes were fixed forward, not on Trump, but through him, the ceremonial posture known as present but unyielding. His jaw didn't move, neither did his fingers. And yet the energy had changed. Not aggressive, not threatening, but undeniable. Something larger than one man, something embedded in the very walls. Trump gave a short, humorless laugh. "I mean, is he serious? I said 3 words. Fix your face, that's it. That's what we're doing now?" He threw up both hands and turned half a step away as if seeking support. Can't even talk to a kid anymore without the redcoats lunging like it's Gettysburg. Still, no one echoed him. And Charlotte, still clutching her project in both hands, looked up at Theon's back. She hadn't moved, but her shoulders had relaxed just slightly. Not all the way, but enough. It wasn't protection she had expected, but now that it was there, it anchored her. Trump turned again, frustration creeping into his voice now. "I've been in palaces bigger than this one," he said, voice louder. "Been around kings. She doesn't need a bodyguard for a sentence." But the room was no longer with him. The corridor, so recently a place of casual movement, now felt suspended, like something historical had just shifted, even if no one knew why yet. He looked at Theon once more, then narrowed his eyes. "You've got no idea who you're dealing with." And for the first time, Charlotte spoke, just 2 words, soft, direct. "He does." The weight of Charlotte's 2 words lingered in the corridor like a fault line cracking beneath marble. He does. Not loud, not defiant, just true. And in that moment no one could deny it. Not Trump, not the aides, not the palace staff now watching from 3 corners of the hallway. Because Theon Ward hadn't moved out of fear or confusion or misunderstanding. He had moved with purpose. His boots were now perfectly centered between the young princess and the former US president, squared to the line of the archway in ceremonial symmetry. His right hand, gloved in white, remained near his sidearm clasp, not touching, not threatening, but aligned. His head did not tilt. His expression did not change, but he had become a boundary, and that changed everything. Trump opened his mouth to speak again, but the words faltered. He looked around, realizing slowly that even his own aides were standing a little farther back now. Not abandoning him, just disengaging, because something in the posture of that guard had transformed the space. This wasn't a personal conflict anymore. It was protocol, ceremonial protocol, older than Trump's presidency, older than television, older even than many of the rooms he had just passed through. It was the idea that a uniform, worn correctly, could become a wall against disrespect without needing to speak a single word. Trump scoffed again, more subdued now. "You've got to be kidding," he muttered, his voice half swallowed by the walls. He turned toward one of his aides. "Get the security guy. I want—" But he didn't finish the sentence, because Theon shifted again. Not forward, not aggressive, but firm. His left foot slid half a pace, recentering his stance with surgical control. His shoulders straightened further. A move so small most would miss it, but it was the recalibration of a line, a signal that the corridor was no longer shared, it was being held. Behind him, Charlotte remained quiet. She hadn't moved since her words, but something had changed in her face, not confidence exactly, but certainty. She was no longer guessing at whether she had misunderstood. She knew she hadn't. And Theon Ward's stillness confirmed it. Trump stepped back a pace. Not because he'd been ordered to, but because for the first time he couldn't read the room. And worse, the room wasn't reacting to him anymore. The staffer who'd helped Charlotte gently motioned toward a side alcove, suggesting they move, anything to diffuse the moment. But Theon didn't yield. He hadn't received any instruction, nor did he require one. The moment had been his to claim, and now it was his to hold. And so he did. The seconds dragged. Then, somewhere down the corridor, just faint enough to be heard over the stillness, came the unmistakable sound of a secondary door opening. Leather shoes, a clipped pace. Someone else had been alerted. And Theon Ward didn't need to look to know who was coming. Theon didn't look away. Even as footsteps approached from the far corridor, even as the staff began to shift awkwardly, whispering to one another, glancing toward the side doors, his posture remained locked. His eyes remained forward. His body held a space that no one dared intrude upon. But others tried. "Sir," one of Trump's younger aides stepped in carefully, speaking in a voice clearly meant to sound harmless. "Let's just move back into the formal hall, yeah? Your camera team's almost ready anyway." Trump waved him off. "Not now." The aide glanced at the guard, then back to Trump, then at Charlotte, his face trying to do math it wasn't trained for. A girl, a guard, a moment. Nothing violent, nothing loud, but undeniably wrong. Another staffer, this one from the palace side, moved to the perimeter. She wore a slim earpiece and a soft charcoal blazer, her ID clipped neatly to her lapel. "Sergeant Ward is posted here for ceremonial continuity," she explained carefully, as if rehearsing a line she didn't expect to ever use. "His discretion in proximity engagement is respected." Trump turned to her with an incredulous look. "Respected?" "He stepped in front of me." She didn't flinch. "Yes, sir." He laughed dryly. "Is that what passes for manners here?" She didn't answer. Behind Theon, Charlotte hadn't spoken again. But she hadn't moved either. Her fingers were now tucked behind her back, still clasping the paper model. She seemed anchored, not by force, but by clarity. Trump shifted his weight, turning to the staffer again. "This is a child's corridor, not a battlefield," he muttered. "I said 6 words and got a royal statue aimed at me." He took a slow breath, visibly calming himself, then added, "I've visited more palaces than anyone in this hallway. I know what ceremony looks like." And then, perhaps out of habit, or to re-establish authority, he stepped forward again, just 1 foot. Theon's chin lifted, not by much, barely a motion, but it was enough, because everyone saw it, even Trump. Theon wasn't being symbolic anymore, he was drawing a perimeter, and with that one quiet gesture, the balance tipped. Even the Secret Service shifted subtly backward, reading the room like agents trained to avoid scandal more than conflict. No earpieces clicked, no one touched a comm. But they were ready, not for action, but for exit. Because something unspoken was about to break. And it did. Not from a shout, not from a shove, but from the polished wood of the corridor door behind them sliding open. A quiet voice followed. "Charlotte?" It was Prince William. "Charlotte?" The voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Prince William stepped into view from the adjacent corridor, his tailored navy suit sharply offset by the soft cream stone surrounding him. One look at his face, and every aide, both American and British, realigned their stance. His expression wasn't angry, but it was taut, controlled. He scanned the space quickly, cataloguing the elements. His daughter, standing quiet behind a royal guard. The guard, out of formation, not rattled, but holding a clear defensive posture. Donald Trump, mid-gesture, surrounded by frozen staffers and half-engaged security. The atmosphere told him everything he needed before anyone spoke. Charlotte turned toward him instinctively, her project still clutched in her hands. She didn't run to him. She simply moved closer by a few paces, positioning herself beside the scarlet shoulder of Theon Ward, whose frame had not shifted. William approached slowly. "Theon," he said softly. "Sir," the guard responded, voice low and level. The first time he had spoken in the presence of a royal since his appointment. His eyes didn't break posture, but his voice acknowledged command. William's gaze dropped to Charlotte, then returned to Trump. "What happened here?" he asked. Not an accusation, just an audit of facts. Trump exhaled loudly, trying to inject lightness. "I made a comment, that's all. She looked upset, I said something about her face, and then this guy decides he's Churchill." William said nothing. Charlotte looked up, hesitated, and then, calmly, answered herself. "He told me to fix my face when he's talking," she said. There was no tremble in her voice. Just truth. Trump raised his eyebrows. "It was a joke. Come on." William remained still. He nodded slightly, not to agree, but to acknowledge the statement. Then he turned back to Theon. "Was this your judgment?" Theon spoke without pause. "Yes, sir." "And why did you step in?" Theon didn't blink. Because her expression required no correction. Silence followed. Not stiff, not angry, just final. Trump scoffed, shifting back. "Seriously?" William's posture changed now, just slightly. His left foot set more firmly, hands clasped behind his back. "I'm going to say this once," he said, voice calm but harder now. "Inside this palace, a child's dignity is not subject to commentary. Not by staff, not by visitors, not by heads of state. Trump's expression cracked, just for a second, a flash of resentment before being papered over with a tight-lipped grin. "I didn't mean anything by it." "I know," William said. "That's the problem." He turned to the palace aide, nearest the rear hall. "Please escort my daughter to the residence. Inform the Duchess I'll follow shortly." Charlotte stepped forward. She didn't need to be told twice. She glanced back only once, not at Trump, but at Theon. He didn't move, he didn't smile, but his chin dipped half an inch, a gesture only she saw. It was enough. William watched her walk away. And when she turned the corner and was fully gone, he looked back toward Trump and said quietly, "Sometimes silence is discipline, sometimes it's defense. Today it was both." He turned and walked out without another word. Theon remained behind. Not because he had to, because he chose to. Trump remained in the hallway after William disappeared down the east corridor, his arms slightly raised in theatrical disbelief. "This is absurd," he muttered, mostly to the aides now cautiously returning to his side. "She's a kid. I said something mild. That guard stepped in like I'd thrown a punch." He glanced back at Theon, still standing in the same square of marble, still facing him without expression, still immovable. Trump shook his head and tried to laugh again, louder this time. "You really going to stand there like some kind of silent saint? She's what, 9, 10? You think I traumatized her by telling her to smile?" Theon didn't answer. That silence, again, wasn't blank. It was charged. It was intentional, and Trump, who built his world on being the loudest in the room, was slowly realizing what silence looked like when it came from someone whose power didn't rely on volume. Trump stepped forward another half-pace, gesturing. "I've dealt with NATO, the UN, even Buckingham before. Never had someone in red wool try to play parent." Still no answer. And then, breaking the stillness, not with motion but with precision, Theon finally spoke. His voice was measured, quiet, a tone practiced over decades. It was the voice of someone who only spoke when it mattered, and now it did. "You told her to change her face." Trump blinked, as if expecting more. "Because it didn't please you." Theon's words were not loud, not emotional, but they struck with clinical force. "I stepped forward," he finished, "because it wasn't her face that needed fixing." The corridor didn't gasp. There was no dramatic shuffle, but the air changed, subtly, unmistakably. Trump's face shifted. His hand dropped. His mouth opened slightly, then closed, because there was no comeback, no joke to cover it, no room for bluster in a hallway now held by silence and discipline. The aides said nothing. Even his own security remained still. And Theon, he returned to silence. Not because he was finished, but because he'd said the only sentence that needed to be said. By the time Donald Trump's shoes left the corridor, the palace had already begun to shift. No announcements were made, no staffers raised their voices, but movements changed, routes rerouted, rooms reassigned. The Lord Chamberlain's office, already on passive monitor for Trump's walkthrough, logged the incident the moment Theon Ward broke post. Not as a scandal, not as a threat, but as a deviation event. Category 3, Internal Protection Minor. The tag was enough. Within 7 minutes, a quiet administrative assistant carried a sealed folder through the East Arch. The folder contained 3 items: a transcript request of the security corridor feed, a ceremonial reassignment form, and an itinerary adjustment labelled Foreign Dignitary Conflict Aversion. It would never reach the press, but it would reach the right rooms. Trump, for his part, had gone silent. The weight of William's words and Theon's final sentence still hung over him. He didn't storm, didn't bluster, just walked with a shallow shrug, muttering to his lead aide, "Get me back to the green room. I don't want to see that kid again." His filming schedule was adjusted before he arrived. What was once a full-access pre-interview tour of the Rose drawing room was now limited to a press-ready backdrop and a fixed camera position. All family wings locked out. Staff instructed not to escort beyond primary threshold. No explanations, no confrontation, just refinement. Theon Ward, meanwhile, had not moved. He remained posted in the same 3 by 3 foot marble square until a silent nod from the Lord Chamberlain's equerry released him. It wasn't punishment, it was precision timing. He stepped out of the corridor without flourish, handed his rifle to the ceremonial steward, and walked the long passage toward the South Rotunda in silence. At the fourth junction, he passed a familiar face. It was Prince William's private secretary, a former military officer turned senior coordinator. He didn't stop Theon, he simply handed him a folded paper. No seal, no stamp. Inside was a single line. Your discretion protected the legacy of both Crown and Child. Report to West Wing briefing room at 0600 tomorrow. Theon read it once, folded it again, and nodded. Elsewhere, in the upper apartments, Charlotte sat beside her mother in the soft glow of the private residence salon. Her diorama had been placed gently on a nearby table, untouched. She wasn't talking much, not out of fear, but out of processing. Catherine didn't push her. She simply asked one question. Did you feel safe? Charlotte nodded. Did you feel heard? Charlotte nodded again, slower this time, and Catherine smiled softly. Then that's what matters. Meanwhile, back near the Lower East Hall, Trump's team was quietly informed that the planned garden photo opportunity had been rescheduled. No official statement, just an internal note passed through scheduling. Garden lighting unsuitable. Please remain in Rose Chamber until departure. It was understood. Within 24 minutes of the incident, the Lord Chamberlain's assistant had already reclassified Trump's visit from high-profile courtesy review to restricted filming access, Group B. No formal reprimand would be filed, but the update ensured that the next time he visited, if he ever did, his access to internal corridors would be reduced by 70%. The system didn't escalate through volume. It recalibrated through silence. And in the palace, that was far more permanent. By nightfall, the corridor where it happened had already been repolished. The ceremonial shift log noted, minor procedural intervention resolved on scene. Nothing more. But Theon's name had been entered into a separate ledger. Not public, not visible. Kept only by the private secretary's office. It was titled, Moments of Unyielding Conduct. A log only used when a royal guard acted not for ceremony, but for legacy. Theon Ward's name would now sit beside 7 others, some forgotten, some quietly honoured, all the same. The next morning, the palace grounds moved as they always had. Slow, deliberate, unshaken by headlines the public would never read. Ceremonial rehearsals resumed near the quadrangle. The kitchen staff reviewed the luncheon draft for the following weekend. Gardeners trimmed the west hedges by hand, as they'd done every Thursday since spring. But in one narrow side vestibule near the south lawn, Charlotte paused. She was on her way to a morning study session with her language tutor, a small notebook tucked under her arm. Her uniform was neat, navy skirt, pressed blouse, pale blue cardigan buttoned to the collar. No cameras, no press. Just her and her governess walking in calm rhythm. Except she slowed, just slightly, as they passed the interior arch. And that's when she saw him. Theon Ward stood at attention near the doorway to the household office. He was back in rotation, wearing the same red tunic, tall, plain, solid black ceremonial bearskin hat, white gloves, rifle shouldered, still, unflinching. Charlotte's eyes met his for only a second. Long enough. She didn't wave, didn't curtsy. She simply gave a nod, the smallest nod, honest, acknowledging, enough. And Theon, without breaking form, returned it. A blink slower, a breath deeper. But there. Then she was gone, footsteps soft against the stone. The corridor returned to silence. But something had passed between them, not royal and guard, not adult and child, something cleaner, witness and protector. There would be no medal, no mention, no speech. But that didn't matter, because legacy didn't always leave its mark through brass or ceremony. Sometimes it was one step forward, sometimes it was one word, chosen carefully. And sometimes, but it was the kind of silence that taught a child, you are not wrong for being who you are. You are not alone when someone speaks to you like you're smaller than you should be. And someone is always watching, not to correct you, but to defend you, even if they only ever do it once. Do you think Sergeant Theon Ward did the right thing by stepping in, even without permission? Should children of the royal family be protected the same way as the crown itself? And what would you have said if someone told your daughter to fix her face? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one. If this story moved you, tap the like button so more people see it. Make sure you're subscribed with the bell icon turned on. We tell one of these stories every single day. And if someone you know believes silence has no power, send them this video tonight. 2 more are now appearing on your screen. Tap 1 to keep watching. We'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place, with a brand new Royal Guard story.